Welcome all to our LinkedIn Live series on product innovation. And I'd love to hand things over to Beth, who's leading our session today.
Next slide. So we are so excited to be in our last and final LinkedIn Live. But before we start, we'd like to talk a little bit about where we've been. We started off talking about what it takes in a company to innovate and the culture. And then we introduced what we called our phase gate light process. And we covered gates 1 through 4, including concept development, the business case, the product development methodology, and then testing. Today, we're going to talk about the most exciting gate that all three of us can agree on, new product development. So this is what happens, culminating the phase gate process into new product development. But before that, I'd like to have us introduce ourselves. So hello, I'm Beth Simplatsky-Mortori, and I'm a partner and CMO with Chief Outsiders. I have over 25 years of experience in new product development and launch. I cut my teeth in the phase gate methodology at Philips, where we had a very robust phase gate process. And when appropriate, I've introduced several of my Chief Outsiders clients to this process. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Amit, who's going to introduce himself, and then Angus.
Good afternoon. My name is Ahmed Abaji. I'm a partner and CMO with Chief Outsiders. My new products background ranges from consumer products to healthcare to sporting goods, durables, footwear, apparel, so a broad range, and looking forward to sharing some insights today with you.
And Angus.
Thanks so much, Beth, and thanks, Ahmed. Really excited to be here. I'm focused on B2B SaaS. I'm a partner and CMO here at Chief Outsiders. I've had more than 20 years in the B2B tech space, in telco, and then in B2B SaaS. And I came from a product management and product marketing background before taking over a more holistic look at marketing. So fundamentally, I'm very passionate about product market fit. And what I think of interesting about product launch is it's a moment in time or an instant where you can measure how effective that product market fit is. So really excited about this topic today.
Okay, so before we get started, for those of you that have been with us all along the way, we talked extensively last time about the two different approaches to product development. And we're going to review those now because they're important to product launch. Because of the different methodologies, it does culminate in different types of launches. So just a quick review of the waterfall or traditional method. As you can see from the graphic, it's very linear. It's characterized by being very rigid with change processes and governed by an executive management team that has oversight. You don't launch the product until you've gone through each gate and been signed off on each gate. It's used a lot of times for when you can't have any mistakes in the process. The Agile method, on the other hand, it has a lot of rapid iterations called sprints. You want to get value to the customer very quickly. And once the team is given the project, the team governs how fast they go and what the requirements are. And in this case, the customer approves each sprint as opposed to a governing body. And so you're launching all the time in sequence. And Ahmed is going to talk to you about product launch in the waterfall, and Angus is going to talk about the Agile method. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Ahmed, who has extensive experience in the product launch in the traditional method. And he's actually going to open up the tent and share some things that can go wrong in the process. We want to start there because you can learn a lot of times much more from that than when something goes right. So Ahmed, why don't you share some of the things that you've learned in the product development process?
Sure. Obviously, until this point, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears has gone into the process. And this is product launches when you really start to collect the fruits of your labor. But interestingly, we see a lot of companies that do really, really well with their process all the way to this effort, to this phase. But they don't do as well at this phase to really get the return on their investments. So if you're a new CEO to an organization, if you're a new head of marketing or innovation in an organization, I'll share with you a few observations you can make to sort of that can signal to you there may be problems with the new product launch process in your organization. And I have personally seen all of these. I have gone into an organization that was talking about, hey, we launched a new product last month. I'm like, okay, what did we do? Oh, we created the product catalog. Or we put it on our Shopify website, so it's on our website for consumers to buy. So to me, if an organization is defining new product launch like that, that's a flag that raises immediately. The next one is very similar to that. We had a big sales meeting, had a lot of fun, and talked to our salespeople, presented to our salespeople. We launched the product. And if the discussion ends there, then we have a problem. I'm not saying any of these are wrong, but if that's sort of where people stop talking about the new product launch, then we have a serious problem. Another very obvious one, again, depending on what people's perspectives, we started manufacturing the products and we built inventory. And if that is perceived as a problem, as a product launch, then we have a problem. Next slide, please. Again, similar scenarios. You see many companies sell on Amazon these days, and you develop your listing on Amazon. A few weeks into it, Amazon removes your listing because you're having a lot of shipment damages. That is a sign that maybe you didn't think all the way through to design and plan your launch, and that causes serious issues and delays really getting the revenue from that launch. Again, if you have a really, really good sales team, they can sell a big pipeline order to your customers and have a huge initial sales. But a few months down the road, you're not getting any repeat orders, and it's crickets. That is a problem with your product launch. And we'll talk about what these problems are in the end when we get into best practices. And also a very common symptom that we see across is there is disagreement in the organization, right? The head of sales says, hey, the product launch is going really well. Finance looks at it and says, no, it's not doing so well. The CEO has a different opinion. Marketing has a different opinion. If people are not on the same page, whether it's successful or not, that is also a big problem with your launch process.
Well, thank you, Ahmet. I, like Ahmet, have a lot of experience in this type of launch. And I have to say my favorite on that list is the organization considers the product launch once you can make it. And I think in a lot of manufacturing-driven organizations, we make that mistake. And as marketers, it's up to us to educate the organization on what it takes to make a successful product launch. And so with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Angus, who's going to share with us some of his best practices on what makes a successful product launch in SaaS and Agile.
Great, thank you, Beth. And Ahmet, couldn't agree with you more that alignment and coordination is so important, and of course, definition of success. One of the areas I feel passionately about in the world of B2B and in particular SaaS is working with customers early on. And of course, you could be launching a new company with a new product, and that's going to take a lot more time and research, or you can already have an existing company with an existing product and existing customers. In either scenario, the ability to clearly identify who your personas are, what are their titles, what are their demographics, and what are the types of companies they work for, those firmographics of the company in terms of the size of the company, the location of the company are so critical, because understanding those personas, what they do day in and day out, how their day progresses, the activities they have, and the pains that they have are so important in that new product development, but also in the launch, because those customers you already have, where you're adding that capability, they have that pain or that desire, you can work with them proactively and engage them in that process. So this requires not only the right persona with the right pain, but also that they have the psychographics and that mindset of being more of an early adopter. So these early adopters like to be involved in new things, and they like to collaborate with vendors or companies on developing new products. So finding the right mindset and also the right personas with that pain or that desire is really critical, and making them feel part of that journey with you. The second part that is equally critical is that within the type of persona, Beth and I are dueling over slides here. I think I might have just one, but so having the persona defined both from a mindset standpoint and also a pain standpoint or desire standpoint. But secondly, that you want them to be an influencer. You want them to have a community that they work within. That could be a regional community or a functional community. It could be online, it could be physical, and you want them to be able to talk to each other. So you're sort of attacking two birds with one stone, because you're solving that persona's problem. They're excited about it, and they're sharing that process and that progress with their friends. So as you move down your product launch lifecycle or product launch process, you get feedback, of course, from these early adopters, and this can form and refine your launch goals, your customer testimonials, your customer case studies. So I find that this is really critical, doing so early on, both for establishing those reference customers and some early dollars. The Amazon press release, I think many of you or some of you have probably heard about it before, but I think this is a great exercise in ensuring you have that end state clearly in mind. So if everything worked out perfectly, what would that press release look like? How would you like to be able to communicate to the market, to the media, to the analysts, to the influencers in your market? So understanding what that end state and that outcome, that success criteria, I think is important. And having a 1-page or at most a 2-page press release actually clarify that for the stakeholders involved in the product launch is very helpful, because you're distilling down to those core elements. And here you can see that there's a very clear headline about what the product name is, what it does, and then talk about the market it's serving, the key problems or desires that are being addressed, and how we uniquely solve it. And then very importantly, and again, here you can leverage from your early adopter customers, have quotes or testimonials that validate your go-to-market. And this can be a great way of getting the stakeholders involved in the product development or product launch process, whether they're on the services side, training side, marketing, sales, development side, really clear about what success is, what the end goal is, and make sure everybody's working in tandem to achieve that. So a couple of things that I like to think about in the world of B2B SaaS, Beth.
Well, thank you so much, Angus. One of the things that I really liked about what you shared, and is good across both methodologies, is the Amazon press release, because you really do need to know what your end goal is to get there, regardless of the iterations. So I think it keeps the team's mind focused on the end deliverable and keeps them motivated to keep chugging ahead as they're going through that process. Amit, now that you've opened up the kimono and shared some of your personal experiences where things didn't go right, why don't you now share with us some of your best practices for a launch in the traditional or waterfall method?
Sure. And I think if the organization has really followed the process we laid out in previous discussions, the launch should be a good addition, and you should have a good foundation to really execute these best practices. I think the overarching best practice in my mind boils back to what I learned early in my career. What makes a new product, win or fail? And there are two very, very simple things. One is there is a reason for being for the new product, and hopefully the previous phases you have gone through. Building the business case, doing the testing, and all of those, sort of confirms that there is a reason for being for the product. The next piece is when new products fail, you have failed to drive awareness of that new product. So that's the most critical thing at this phase from a consumer perspective. In whatever business you're in, build it and people will come and buy it. Doesn't work. You have to actively promote and generate the demand for it. The first one, I think, best practice, if you get into a little bit specifics in my mind, is setting external customer-centric metrics. The examples I gave, symptoms of not having a good process, if you noticed, one theme around them was they were all internally defined success or definitions of new product. So are you driving the distribution? Are you driving the awareness? Are you driving repeat purchases? All of these, hopefully they were previously defined in your business cases. You made assumptions when you develop your forecast. You don't need to come up with new metrics. Make sure that you are sort of validating your assumptions as you go through the launch. Some of these metrics have to be sort of worked on prior to actually making the product available. So if you're going to be a direct-to-consumer business only, you may have to start working on your SEO to build, the traffic and the content. A lot of healthcare companies, they do a lot of pre-launch marketing. So you have to sort of have your metrics defined very well. I mean, am I driving awareness before the product is available? Am I getting all the fundamentals in place? The second one is maintaining cross-functional work through launch. We talked about the importance of cross-functional work throughout the previous phases. A lot of companies stop that cross-functional work as soon as manufacturing starts and teams are disbanded and all of that. And the belief is the remaining work is to be done by the marketing and the sales teams. It is very important to maintain operations, finance, everybody together through launch. Because you're going to run into issues. You're going to need to course correct. Your forecast will be different. You're going to need to manage inventories. You're going to need to address issues like maybe the Amazon packages being damaged. Hopefully, if you were thinking ahead, if you took into consideration the customer or the channel requirements, you did your shipment testing before you launch, but you may run into issues like this and you need to address them very quickly. Do not treat every launch equally. I think one of the big problems we see is, from a simple, feature improvement, new colors, all the way to like extending into a completely new category. Companies try to, treat these launches the same way. Understand the role of the product in your overall strategy. If it's like a high risk, big bet type of launch, you're getting into a new category, you're launching into a new market, put more effort, more detailed metrics, and maybe higher marketing budgets behind that. And finally, this is really where it makes the biggest difference. This is how you really drive the awareness, have an effective marketing and sales plan. We don't need to get into details of how you develop that, but the number one way to figure out if you have an effective marketing and sales plan is during the year when you have a major launch, did you increase your marketing budget? If you are assuming you can, launch a major new product into a new category with your current budget levels of marketing, then there may be something wrong. Either you are neglecting the rest of your business, or previously you had very high marketing budgets that you didn't need. So it's one way or another, right? So if you're on a normal course of spend level, during the year of a major launch, your marketing expenses should go up.
Well, thank you, Ahmet. I think these are all really very good practices that we can learn from. And it's also, I think the best advice that you're giving here is to understand that there are different categories of product launch, and as marketers, we need to educate our organizations on what they are and get them ready for those different levels of marketing spend, right? If we're going to be successful, we need to match the marketing budgets, as Ahmet said, to the type of product launch. So with that, I'd like to finally wrap up here with Angus, who's going to share a product launch checklist for Agile companies. Thank you, Angus.
Yeah, thank you, Beth. So I've been involved with a lot of product launches over 20 years, and they almost always involve some very complicated spreadsheet with lots of tabs and lots of cross-functional meetings with lots of people in the meetings. And there can be hundreds of individual tasks and activities and Gantt charts and dependencies. But I think it's important to understand what are the key success criteria. And for B2B and for product, my experience is these 6 things are the most important when it comes down to the launch. So on the product side, having a very clear vision and roadmap that aligns to the corporate strategy and corporate vision. I was working not too long ago with a company that is approaching $1 billion in revenue, and they were launching a very cool new product in a very hot space and lots of growth. But what's interesting is they didn't have a product architecture or a vision or a roadmap for that product. And I think that's so critical when communicating to the market. Where are you going, and why is this such a critical milestone in that journey? Because your customers or prospects want to know where you're going and ensure they're investing in something that supports their future requirements too. On the positioning side, we talked about this already. I think that Amazon type press release is a great way of getting everybody aligned around what really matters about this product launch and the value proposition with that solution. And here, it's important to think about your different channels. So of course you have your website, you have the media, you have the analysts, but the internal employees are so important. So not just the stakeholders and the folks who are involved in developing and launching this product, but think about all employees, and of course, any employees that have that customer or prospect facing engagement. So, sales and customer success need to be very confident and excited about what you're launching. And I would argue that all employees should be aware of what is being launched as well and can be part of that excitement. This is another area, why switch? I think about this really about customer advocacy, but I like the idea of thinking of it a little differently, the why switch. So if you have a market, you have customers and prospects, they have a current state that they're in. They could be quite comfortable in the current state. What's the urgency? What's the need? Why would they switch from the current state to the new state? And having those early access customers who can help reinforce that and talk about why they made the switch and why that change was so beneficial for them. On the demand generation side, of course, this makes sense in reinforcing the other companies that align with your target market personas and challenges. And as we talked about, the sales enablement side, I think, is so critical in making sure that they can really, truly represent the voice of the business case that was developed early on and present that to the market. And being able to showcase that solution, whether it's a consumer product or a high-tech product, understanding not just what the value proposition is, but being able to demonstrate the value proposition and then have the market validation, especially in the case of existing customers or early access customers, that they're able to validate that. It's interesting from a product launch standpoint. Almost 10 years ago, I was working with company who had a phenomenal market, very high customer satisfaction with their existing product. They knew that technology and needs of customers were changing. They wanted to introduce a new analytics product, but they didn't want to potentially cannibalize their existing customer base. So they only wanted to make this new functionality available for companies they weren't selling to already. There's a fundamental flaw in that approach because you've got hundreds, if not thousands, of existing customers that are very happy with your existing solution, know you very well. They can provide you amazing support and feedback and ideas on your new product and actually introduce you to new customers. So being able to leverage your existing customers to get new customers is one of the most critical things to do when it comes to product launch and achieving that flywheel effect. So you're not completely dependent on your own marketing and your own sales dollars.
Well, thank you, Angus. This launch checklist is very valuable, and you make a lot of good points. And in fact, I think that I'd like to talk about what are some of the takeaways that we see here today. First, Amit, I'd like to hear from you. What is one of your big takeaways from today's presentation?
My big takeaway is new products are like babies, and let me explain why. I think about existing products of our organization as sort of adult children. They have reached a point where they can survive on their own, right? They're existing customers, people know them, there's a lot of ecosystem around them that keeps them alive. New products are like babies, and you need to nurture them and support them to make them successful in this jungle of marketplace. If you throw them out there and assume that they're going to go from the hospital to like college, you are going to fail because they need that support on an ongoing basis, starting with before the baby is born, right? So we all get ready, get the nursery ready, and paint the house and whatever. So start your planning early, and after the product is available, nurture them, and that's how they're going to grow. And when we look at big companies that have reached unicorn levels, they did not get to that point overnight. There was a lot of support after the initial launch.
Well, thank you, Amit. How about you, Angus? What's one of your big takeaways from today's presentation?
Well, Ahmed, I love your analogy, and I can't help but jump on board and continue. So we've talked about 5 stages or 5 gates in the product development or product lifecycle process. And of course, here we're talking about this step 5 or gate 5, which is product launch. Arguably, there's a 6th, which is curating or nurturing that product into maturity and then to old age and, dare I say it, end of life. But I think one of the things that's most important, as Ahmet highlights, is there needs to be a lot of nurture early on, and then as the product gets established and gets into adulthood, it can flourish. There's brand awareness, there's wide adoption, but then, of course, inevitably, or more often than not, there will be that deprecation or the end of life or end of service of that product or solution. And that's a really important part too. So many companies, especially in my experience on the B2B side, forget about that stage, that final phase in the product lifecycle before you start anew. And that can actually be one of the most profitable stages. And also, there's many customers out there who are able to use your legacy product very effectively. They have the budget, they're very happy. They don't want it to go away. They might even be willing to pay more to keep it going and for additional service. So I think it's absolutely worth having that focus on more mature products and supporting very high profit revenue streams that can then fund development on launching new products as well. So think about the entire product life cycle.
And I think that's actually a really good point to wrap up this series, right? Because we talked about the culture before we got into the phase gate. And now we're talking about how you look at your product portfolio and managing over its entire life cycle, from pre-birth all the way through how you think about what do you do either for as you retire the products, and or how do you basically get the most revenue streams from those products to support then again the new product development. And so with that, I'd like to kind of wrap up our whole series and thank everybody for participating with us in Why Innovate. Of course, a topic that all 3 of us are very, very passionate about. What I'd like to do is, if you have any interest in seeing the whole presentation, next slide, please, the whole presentation, or any of the blogs and the previous LinkedIn Lives, you can go to our website, Chief Outsiders, and we've got everything on there. If you have any questions about any of this, you can reach out to Amit, Angus, or myself. And with that, we'd like to thank you for your time and attention today.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, everybody. Thank you, Beth.